Hello friends, this is Growl. I've been lucky enough to get early access to the War Within Alpha, and I'm here bringing my first impressions and thoughts on how Mistweaver Monk is looking going into the next expansion. I'll be honest, Mistweaver at times has felt like the redheaded stepchild of the healers, and especially before Dragonflight, but their latest iteration with the new talent tree has showed a huge improvement both in gameplay style and just in overall power. Mistweaver has even been appearing in the top 10 Raider IO healers at the end of the season for high keys, in the first time since, well, like ever. And that trend seems like it might continue. It honestly feels like somebody new got hired at Blizzard that actually takes care of the spec and has been making effective change after effective change. Many small issues that I had with Mistweaver during Dragonflight are already being looked at and approved upon in the current iteration of the alpha build. First, I want to break down the hero talent trees. Although they are somewhat simple, they offer two slightly different gameplay styles and healing profiles. The first one that has already been known before this alpha build is Conduit of the Celestials. This tree revolves around a new ability, Celestial Conduit. It's pretty simple, you just press it and you radiate healing around you. You can still move around and reposition during the channel, which is nice. Think of it like a super powerful essence font. The rest of the talents aren't too impactful, they just sort of make small buffs to the conduit as well as your other basic healing abilities. There's some stuff in here about like reactivating the conduit to boost the power of it and summon celestials. However, the channel is like pretty short, the boost just auto activates at the end anyway. I sort of think they should just scrap the whole double press thing and just summon all the celestials when you press it, unless I'm like missing some way around how you should play this. The other hero tree is the Master of Harmony. This tree appeared somewhat buggy during the first alpha build, but we can read the abilities and get a general idea of how it's supposed to work. The tree is almost entirely passive. It's essentially storing up power into a pool every time you use your abilities. Then when you press Thunder Focus T, it spends the power out of that pool to increase your spells. I really like the way this is set up, considering Thunder Focus T is a button that essentially every type of Mistweaver is constantly pressing. It can be something that you just set and forget if you don't want to have to worry about it. However, you can also do some cool combos with it with Thunder Focus and Secret Infusion, and then have some big healing buttons like Shaylun's or Chi-Ji. I think especially in Raid, this tree will have some finesse to it. There are some cool quality of life options in this tree, such as getting a second charge on Thunder Focus T, getting a shortened cooldown on your roll, and even allowing your Tiger's Lust to cleave onto allies. If the Cleave Tiger's Lust also removes slows, this could actually have some cool interactions where you're skipping mechanics by removing multiple debuffs off your party members at the same time. The class and spec trees are also littered with cool changes and improvements. I'll go over the ones I found most interesting, but this definitely isn't all of them. The first thing I noticed is that there's a talent node that allows Paralysis to soothe and rage effects. Previously, Druid and Evoker were the only healers that could dispel enrages. One thing I am wondering, considering that you can't para all types of mobs, I wonder how it'll work with mobs that are immune to the para, or also mobs that have an enrage effect that makes them immune. Will the soothe still work? If the soothe works, does the para work? And so on. I'm not doing any super deep dive testing only because I expect stuff like this to be iterated on and changed during the alpha. The second thing I noticed was the removal of Dampen Harm. I know nobody likes to lose abilities. The Mistweaver defensive toolkit, though, just had way too many buttons. Dampen Harm and Fort Brew were essentially like the same spell, so seeing Dampen go will free up a keybind, and I, for one, am always happy about that. This also allows you to mess around with the talent Dance of the Wind. It's essentially a stacking buff that increases your dodge, but it was always in a choice node with Dampen, so you could never take it. I actually think it might be kind of a good talent. It might have some niche uses against certain mechanics, or maybe even something crazy like being able to taunt a boss for a big hit, but you just never really saw play because it was paired with Dampen. The last rework in the class tree is the Capstones, which are like 3 major mobility options. They all interact with current abilities, so there's no keybind bloat, nothing more that you have to worry about, like before with the statues with Black Ox or White Tiger. The first one, Lighter Than Air, gives you the ability to do a short dash after your roll. You simply just input a double jump with a direction being held. You can go forward, left, or right, and it boosts you in that direction. It felt a little weird at first, but Actually, I think it'll end up being a really cool ability. Sometimes there's a dangerous situation where you just quickly roll and it's not totally accurate, or you end up in another bad spot or on top of somebody. Instead of having to waste your last roll charge and then get stranded, you can simply just sort of use this talent after you roll to get a small little adjustment into a better location. This will also be nice simply for like catching up to the pull if your team ever gets ahead in a dungeon because you're drinking or doing healer stuff. The middle movement option is very similar to Wernstone from Augmentation Evoker. This changes your Transcendence to instead be cast on an ally. You can then teleport to that ally at any time. This will be super handy for skips and dungeons. You can simply just link to somebody that has stealth or some way around, and then you can just teleport right past the pack. Transcendence has always been one of my favorite abilities for Monk, at least flavor abilities, just because there's tons of little situations you can use it, and I think this will give you even more exciting options. The last movement option was a little bit clunky when I used it, but it may see some improvements as the alpha goes on. Rushing reflexes causes your character to lunge to a nearby enemy after you roll if there is one nearby. This one felt the weirdest out of the three. It was a little out of place for a Mistweaver because spinning crane kick has a little bit of range anyway. You don't necessarily need to snap right onto the mob. The roll also sometimes wouldn't work like how you'd expect it to. I definitely see it like snapping back to enemies if you're trying to roll out of danger. Maybe people will enjoy this in like PvP or something. Maybe it'll just be a Brewmaster thing. I don't know. I don't think it sees too much of a place in the Mistweaver kit. But now onto the spec tree, which surprisingly has a bunch of new stuff as well. When setting up my keybinds, I had to do a double take because Essence Font is actually gone. Honestly, Essence Font is a super cool ability. You always love pressing it and jumping around, but realistically, if you're trying to play well, it was such a mana hog and it never really did the healing that you needed it to do. This is going to free up another big keybind for you, which you may end up wanting to just put your new Celestial Conduit keybind there anyway. The next question, since Essence Font is gone, how does Ancient Teachings work? Because sometimes your Jadefire didn't reset and your buff would fall off if you didn't use Essence Font. Now Jadefire Stomp has a 15-second cooldown, so as long as you're essentially just pressing Jadefire every time it's up, you'll always have your fist weaving buffs going. Speaking of removed abilities, Zen Pulse is removed or basically completely changed into a new passive. It's now a proc that sometimes activates when you have Renewing Miss out. It doesn't even do damage anymore, it simply just buffs your next Vivify. Although it definitely felt good when you hit like a big Zen Pulse before on like a big AoE pull, in dungeons it was kind of like a whatever button. You just really press it on cooldown on the tank and not really think too much about it. There's kind of a trend in Blizzard removing sort of these whatever press on cooldown buttons, which I'm a huge fan of. Although it is probably the most interesting of the abilities out of everything that got pruned from Mistweaver, it definitely wasn't necessary for like the rotation and the feel for the class. Honestly, sometimes I didn't even take it just because I didn't want to deal with the keybind. Enough of what Mistweaver's losing though, because they gained a talent node for Chi Harmony, the tier set bonus for the season 3 of Dragonflight. This thing synergized so well with the fist weaving sort of DPS toolkit. Sometimes there are people that need extra healing or are in danger, and when you just reapply your Renewing Miss, it gives them a huge buff if they need the extra healing, and then all of your fist weaving abilities are greatly increased on them. It also makes Mistweaver really good for those weird like single target burst healing moments, and that's always been one of Mistweaver's strengths. As you can see, there's so much stuff that's changed in the tree. I've just been going after item after item. I'll leave the rest for you to explore. There are definitely some other interesting passives, stuff like increased movement speed out of combat, increased roll distance, and you can really like customize the way that you want to navigate. If you want to hear a more detailed list of all the changes, I definitely recommend Megaset's video, who was also in the alpha. I went to check it out before making mine. I wanted to have my own unique twist on things, but honestly, she was so thorough with the analysis that I kind of just gave up and I said, well, I'll just talk about what I find is cool. I also want to mention my overall thoughts, how the class felt to play in dungeons. I did get a chance to play it in some dungeons. It's true as a healer that it's kind of hard to know when you're doing like super easy normal mode content, how it's going to feel once you start getting into mythics, but I'm pretty sure Mistweaver is going to be in a great spot. Your fist weaving does a solid amount of healing on essentially any number of targets. You have the tools that you need to deal with downtime if you can't get into melee, or or if people are just taking heavy bursts of damage. The new hero talents don't overcomplicate things, but they still add a nice new flair to the spec. Running around like a crazy person, double jump dashing and teleporting on my allies' heads and stuff was just cool. I really love movement options in games. It's what gets me to sort of fall in love with characters or classes or playstyles. It's originally why I like Druid a lot, and Mistweavers have just been getting better and better. I remember in Shadowlands, I used to tell people that if you wanted that battle style healer where you're just like DPSing in melee and dishing out heals, just play Paladin. Because Mistweaver offers so little and Paladin was just more interesting in every aspect. Honestly, those days I think are over. Mistweaver has really carved out its own niche among the WoW healers and has like a very unique and interesting playstyle. Yeah, you could be a caster Mistweaver, I guess, but who the heck wants to do that? That wraps up my first impressions and overview of the changes to Mistweaver Monk in the War Within. Thank you for watching. I hope to cover tons more content specifically around healers going into the new War Within expansion. If there's stuff I missed or things you want to see covered, definitely throw them into the comments. For now, I think this might be the last class-specific video that I want to cover, mainly because the other classes haven't received major reworks or have some of their hero talent trees that aren't yet implemented. So I kind of want to talk about some of the general systems in the War Within. That being said, I haven't forgotten about the shamans and the paladins and stuff. I'll definitely get back to that later. Anyway, thanks for watching again and happy keying.